Alright, so here we go with section 5.2, I guess B now. B like boy, because we're going to go to the second section now and say we're going to talk about the next step, which is the power of a product and the power of a quotient. So here is our B section. We're going to get through two different kind of rules here: power of a product, power of a quotient. And over here is our definition again of b to the nth power. Is b our base times b times b times b, da, 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 and it's multiplied by itself n times. I put this down here to say this is pretty important, so we'll be able to use that throughout the whole chapter and probably even farther on. So keep that in mind. That's going to be really important. So we've gone through this, we've gone through that. Now we're up to here. We're up to the power of a product and power of a quotient. So what's a product? A product is a product of two different factors. If we've got our base represented by x, y, in other words, not just a number, not just a factor, not just a term. Now we've got two terms in there, two variables. It could be a variable, it could be a number, but for right now we're a variable and a number. Right now we're going to look at two variables, x and y, and this is cubed. So inside the parentheses is our base. Here's our base. There's our exponent. So let's write this out maybe the long way. Here's our xy cubed. Again, base and exponent. We've got to multiply this just simply by itself. We've got to multiply the base by itself 3 times. Because here's our base, xy. It's multiplied by itself 3 times. Now let's just simply, let's rewrite everything now in terms of just x's. Let's group all the x's together over here. And let's group all the y's together over here. And now we've just rewritten this over here. We've got x times x times x, y times y times y, and now let's make a shorthand of this. X times x times x is x cubed, y times y times y is y cubed, and there's our answer. And let's see if there's maybe a shortcut that we can take, because we don't want to have to go through all this long step every time that we do something like this. We want to just be able to say, oh, here's my shortcut. So let's take a look at maybe setting up a rule. Down here we say that this is x to the first power and y to the first power. Remember, if there's no exponent written, we have to assume it's a 1. So there's x to the first power, y to the first power, everything multiplied, or I guess everything inside the parentheses taken to the third power. So here's our x to the first, y to the first. Here's our x to the first, y to the first, all cubed. And now our answer was x to the third power, y to the third power. So the rule kind of is that this is x to the first power times 3, first power times 3, times y to the first power times 3, y to the first power times 3 also, because you can think of it as kind of that distributing that 3 into the parentheses kind of backwards. But that's the way that we get our answer. There's our shortcut, is we take the inside exponent multiplied by the outside exponent, and that's our answer for the exponent. So here's our x to the third power, y to the third power, because x was to the first power of the inside, multiplied by 3, you get x to the third power. Y was to the first power on the inside, multiplied by 3, and we get y to the third power. So there's our product rule, and we'll go through this more formally on the next page, but there's the kind of the idea about how to get there. Let's take a look at the quotient rule. What's x? Again, this is what is x divided by y. That's our base to the third power. Here's our question. It should be written a little bit better up here, but sometimes Smartboard just doesn't cooperate sometimes. So here's our x over y to the third power. Here's x over y to the third power. What's the base? What's the exponent? Well, our base is x over y, and we're going to write it right down here again as well. Here's our x over y to the third power, x over y to the third power. Let's just rewrite that, and let's say, well, just by definition, this is our base multiplied by itself 3 times. Oops, sorry. Multiplied by itself 3 times. I'm going to erase that right here. I'm going to go back to blue, and I'm going to say this is x over y. And we're just using our definition of the b to the nth power. Here's our base to the third power. We're taking the base, multiplying it by itself 3 times. Here's the base times the base times the base. Now let's just kind of rewrite this as x times x times x all over y times y times y. And what? Let's use our definition as well to say that this is x to the third power over y to the third power. And again, we use the same kind of idea up here, that if we've got x to the first power and y to the first power, because there's no exponent written, so we have to assume it's a 1. No exponent written, assume it's a 1. We take our inside power, multiply by the outside power, and that's what we get on the answer. X to the third power. 1 times 3 is 3. Y to the third power, sorry, y to the first power, in parentheses, to the third power is y to the 1 times 3 power is y to the third power. So let's take a look at our rule, I guess. Here's our rule. Power of a product, power of a quotient. Right here, take homes, put it on the study guide. That's something you need to remember. Here's our product rule. A, B, again, these are products. If you've got something that's a product, A times B to the mth power, this is A to the mth power times B to the mth power, because it's A to the first power times m, gives you A to the 1 times m, which is A to the mth power. Same thing for the b. B to the first power to the mth power outside the parentheses becomes B to the first power times m, B to the mth power, and there's our answer. Same thing holds true down here. A over B to the mth power is A to the mth power over B to the mth power. And oh, by the way, B cannot be 0 only because this denominator cannot be 0, so therefore B can't be 0. We're ruling that out, but that's essentially, this is the rule itself. All right, so let's go through. Let's see, we've taken up probably enough time here, so let's end here, and we'll do some examples on the next video.